That's much more flattering lighting, Vice President McKinley. I just want you to know I noticed.
Thanks. Let's get a little thing here.
We're good to go, Commissioner Griggs.
We're ready to go. Great. I'll call to order the August 18th, 2020 Salem Planning Commission. Shelby, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Augustine.
Present.
Commissioner Griggs.
Here.
Commissioner Kopcho, I don't think has joined yet. I'll check back on that one. Commissioner Levin.
Here.
Commissioner McKinley.
Here.
Commissioner Pollock.
Here.
Commissioner Schweikart.
Here.
Commissioner Slater.
Here.
And Commissioner Heller is absent, excused, and Kopcho still hasn't arrived yet, but we do have quorum.
Thank you. Moving on, before the consent calendar, I would like to declare that I did listen to the hearing on August 4th and read the materials, so I feel comfortable participating in the vote on the minutes and also in the discussion on the case. So I just wanted to get that on the record. Commissioner McKinley.
I move that we approve the minutes from last month's meeting or last week's meeting.
Okay, and do I have a second?
I'll second.
Is that Commissioner Schweikart?
Schweikart.
Thank you. You're hidden underneath my participant screen. Okay, discussion on the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Oh,
Aye.
do the roll call vote. Sorry. Shelby, would you call the roll for approval of the minutes?
Commissioner Augustine.
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs.
Aye.
And I see Commissioner Kopcho has joined us. We're voting on the minutes. You're up, aye. Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Levin.
Aye.
Commissioner McKinley.
Aye.
Commissioner Pollock.
Aye.
Commissioner Schweikart.
Aye.
Commissioner Slater.
Aye.
And Commissioner Heller is absent.
Thank you. Just a reminder, general reminder also that if we want to make a comment, if you could in the participant screen, or the more screen, do the raise your hand feature, and then we'll capture you and call on you in order. I would like to entertain a motion to reopen the hearing because of the new material that the applicant provided and what I think might be a modification of their application, but I do feel like we need to reopen the hearing to hear that material.
Madam President, I move that we reopen the hearing.
Thank you. And do I have a second?
I second it.
Thank you, Commissioner Pollock. So we'll move to staff. Bryce, your hair is gone.
Yeah, I do look a little bit different from the last meeting.
Okay.
So yeah,
Well,
I just got tired of dealing with my hair. So it's like, I thought I'd try a new look and go low
go
maintenance.
for it. It's a good Kojak look, and you're too young to know who Kojak is.
I'm not Dr. Evil and I'm not Lex Luthor. So.
Okay, you want to
so-
give us kind of an overview of where we are?
Yeah, you bet. So good evening, President Griggs, members of the commission, Bryce Bishop of the Planning Division. So this is deliberations on the previous comprehensive plan change, neighborhood plan change, and zone change that was considered at the last meeting on August 4th. After the hearing was closed to oral testimony, the record was left open for 7 days for additional testimony from any party, any interested person to submit evidence or testimony in regards to the proposal. During that first 7-day period, which ended on August 11th, we received 2 additional items of testimony. One was an email from the Highland Neighborhood Association chair indicating support for the proposal. And then an item of testimony from ODOT, additional testimony in support of the application. Then on August 11th, the open record period closed. And then on August 13th, and this is something I need to correct the record on, the Planning Commission mistakenly received an item of a piece of testimony that should not have been included in the record because it was not from the applicant during their second 7 days for rebuttal. It was rather from a city staff person. So that comment was from Eric Shrunk in Public Works. That comment, because it came after the August 11th, 5 p.m. deadline for comments to be submitted by any party. It should not have been included, in the Planning Commission, information for testimony from the applicant regarding rebuttal of what was provided in the first 7 days. So I would, ask that the record, be clear that the testimony or the email, from Eric Schrunk received on August 13th was not from ODOT, per se. That was from a city staff person. So that was not part of the rebuttal testimony during the second 7-day period that was afforded for this case. In regards to the applicant, sorry, I got a little bit of an echo there. In regards to the this first open record period, staff did provide an additional memo, to the Planning Commission, providing an overview for the additional testimony provided, as well as responding to one of the potential conditions that were brought up at the last meeting about the feasibility or the possibility of establishing a condition of approval that would require the applicant to, initiate a comp plan zone change application to change the zoning and comp plan of the property back after, if ODOT was to sell the property at some point in the future. Staff indicated in the memo kind of the reasons why we wouldn't do that, and it all kind of boils down, or recommend that. It all kind of boils down to the fact that it's hard to guarantee that any future, planned, change in the future, if ODOT wants to sell the property 10 years from now, it's not even clear whether or not the existing CG and the RM2 zoning designations would, be appropriate still. Things could have changed in the neighborhood where they would not be, relevant anymore. And as provided, in the staff in the memo, and is kind of indicated by the applicant during the last hearing, I think there's kind of a built-in incentive, if the state were to move from this location to change the zoning back, to a non-public designation in order to make it more marketable to sell. So, we don't feel a condition is really necessary for that. And then finally, staff provided 2 different alternatives. If the Planning Commission would want to consider something other than staff's recommendation, which at this point is still to, deny the application, but we did provide those 2 additional alternatives. Alternative 1 would have involved changing the comp plan and zoning designation for the northern 4 CG zone lots that affect the property. Let me go back down to the next screen here. So the alternative 1 would involve changing the CG zoning to PS for the northern 4 lots, and also the middle RM2 zone lot that fronts on Commercial Street, as well as the northern portion of the lot at the corner of Liberty and Hickory. It would involve relocating the property line for the large square lot at the southeast corner of the block to the south. So it would be located approximately 20 feet south of the existing property line, or not the property line, but the driveway. As you can see on the slide here, there is a driveway that, let me see, there is a driveway that ODOT has that's actually in the RM2 zone property. So in order to clean up the site, we'd want to move the property line, the east-west one here between the CG and the RM2 down, so it meets the required setback, to the vehicle use area on the ODOT site. And then it would require consolidating all of those interior lots into one lot. And then it would leave the 3 southwest corners on the block as RM2, and it would leave the other southeast corner of the block as RM2. And then there would be required landscaping and screening along the north, west, east, and south property lines as indicated in the memo to bring the site into compliance with the existing, zoning regulations as they would be applied to the property under the new PS zoning, where it currently right now does not conform to the landscaping requirements on the perimeter of the site. And so the condition would be to bring, the site into conformance with the new PS zone as it applies to the property. And then alternative 2, on the other hand, would allow for the approval of the entire site from CG and RM2 to PS, and then it would require consolidation of all the interior lot lines to make one large lot, and then associated, landscaping and screening around the perimeter of the site next to the streets in order to, screen the storage area and the existing vehicle use areas from the surrounding area as required by the code. One other thing I would like to note in the applicant's rebuttal that they submitted during the second 7-day period is that there was an indication that staff might have reached out to the Oregon Fair Housing Council, in order to get their opinion on the proposed comp plan zone change. And I just want to clarify that in the email string that is attached to the memo that we provided, the contact was initiated by the Fair Housing Council. It wasn't initiated by staff, so we weren't out there asking the Fair Housing Council to weigh in on the proposal because it would dealt with housing. Instead, they get notice of all post-acknowledgement plan amendments that are provided to DLCD, and they look at those and then they reach out to staff and give us a heads up that they're going to look at the application. And that's what happened here. They received the notice that we sent to DLCD, which is the Department of Land Conservation and Development, and then they reached out to staff and gave us a heads up that they'd be looking at the proposal. We let them know that the staff report would be available 7 days in advance, and then there were a few emails back and forth regarding the staff report and the findings. So I just wanted to clarify that staff, we did not, reach out, to the Fair Housing Council and ask for their opinion. And also in the applicant's rebuttal, they do indicate that the conditions are not proportional to the proposed impact of the use, and the conditions that were identified in our two alternatives are simply to bring the site into conformance with the zone as it is proposed for the site. The PS zone requires storage areas to be screened. It requires vehicle and use areas and parking areas to be landscaped and set back from adjacent streets and adjacent properties. So the conditions of approval don't require anything beyond what would be required under the PS zoning if the site were to develop brand new. So this condition, because it's already the northern portion of the site is already developed, brings the site into conformance with those requirements. And then finally, the applicants in their rebuttal, they offered a new alternative, which is alternative 3, which I can bring up here really quick. And this involves hope everybody can see that. This involves kind of a compromise or a different position, middle position. So instead of changing the entire site, they're seeking to change the southwest RM2 zoned properties to PS in order to allow them to use this area for their expanded storage area for their traffic signals and signs. And they would leave the existing RM2 at the southeast corner of the block intact. And then they'd also leave the existing CG zoning on the north portion of the site intact, as indicated in their memo or their letter. The site's not currently non-conforming. What they're doing on the site currently doesn't really impact that, or it really doesn't force a need to change it necessarily to bring it into conformance with the code. But, the need to expand their storage area on the site, is the most important priority for the state at this point, and that's why they would seek to under their alternative change the zoning and the comp plan for the southwest RM2 designated properties to PS, and then leave everything else intact. One issue that would still remain under that scenario is we would still have a piece of RM2 zone land that is still kind of encumbered by state facilities with that driveway. And so if the property if this is RM2 zone property, we're kind of left as a means for a piece of property to be reasonably developed for multifamily, possibly at some point in the future. It would probably be best to have some type of reconfiguration to get the driveway off of the RM2, so you would have an unencumbered piece of RM2 zone land without any improvements on it. So that's just a brief update. I would, conclude my presentation. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Looking for questions while people go in to raise their hand. I had one question. Have you had a face-to-face conversation, Bryce, with the applicant on their proposed, I would call it the third alternative?
We had a conversation on the 5th with ODOT staff, I believe, and then the applicant's representative Zoom call, and where we talked about, actually it was let me correct that, it was the 11th. that we had a meeting with them to talk about, what we were going to be, recommending in our memo to the Planning Commission with the alternatives. And but we had not had a face-to-face discussion of the proposed third alternative at this point. This would be the first, when we got it yesterday, this is the first time we saw that.
Okay, so a follow-up would be also that you probably have not had time to analyze their proposal, that the criteria, the setbacks, et cetera, be a little bit more of a conversation to find some more compromise. So you haven't had that opportunity yet either, have you?
No, we have not. We
Okay.
have not had that conversation with them. I would say one thing though about the setbacks. It was indicated in the applicant's rebuttal memo or letter that that staff could potentially negotiate some alternative landscaping and screening standards. That are maybe less than what the zone would require. And staff's position is that I think the only way that could be done is if there had been a zoning adjustment requested, in conjunction with the comp plan zone change in order to reduce the required, setbacks in conjunction with the application. We don't feel that the Planning Commission can, through a comp plan zone change, process, deviate from an established standard of the code.
Okay. Looking at the raise the hand, Commissioner Pollack, you're up. I think maybe you're on mute.
Okay, going back to the original staff report, we were talking about, you were talking about your research in the comprehensive plan maps and the neighborhood plan maps to see how far it went back, the commercial general zoning, and you said back to the 70s. But I was wondering, does a comprehensive plan itself have anything? Because we do have that part of the code that said if the maps and the written portion of the plan are in conflict, the written portion rules. So was there anything in the written portion of the comprehensive plan that would have dealt with the zone, the CG zoning for this property?
The property is designated, and it has been commercial. So the northern portion of the property, there isn't a conflict. The zoning and the comp plan match.
Okay, great. I only had two more questions. Did the ODOT get the building permit for that fence that they keep talking about?
I think it's, I didn't look at that, but I think it's not over a 6-foot fence, and chain link doesn't require a building permit.
Okay. And then the last one, you spoke about the email from the email from the gentleman from the traffic department of the city, and that it came after the shut-off date. Well, now that we reopened the hearing, will that be resubmitted or now accepted, or it's still out?
I would defer to Natasha, but I would assume, that it could be, since the hearing is reopened, it could be part of the record.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Yes.
Okay. Other questions of staff? We'll have another opportunity to get Bryce back on the hot seat after we listen to the applicant. So would the applicant like to address the commission?
Excuse me. President Griggs and members of the commission, again, for the record, Dan Fricke, Senior Planner, Oregon Department of Transportation, Region 2 office here in Salem. I have a bunch of people with me here tonight that'll help me pull my foot out of my mouth as necessary. Laura Wilson, who's the on-site manager of the traffic system signal unit, and then her boss, Galen McGill, who's our overall intelligent transportation system manager. And then also Matt Hasty and Courtney Sims from our consultant Angela planning group. Matt's joining us from Colorado. He's probably having a better time than all of us. So I want to thank Bryce for the excellent presentation again. And I think he did a good job of summarizing our new alternative, a recommended alternative. We think that it does some things. It gets us a minimum amount of area that we would like to use for storage of temporary storage of either variable message signs or signal cabinets, things like that, while they're being tested and configured to be deployed in the field. It also retains some of the RM2 zoning. In addition, our withdrawal of the zone change comp plan amendment portion for the commercial portion of the property would address another one of the staff's concerns about retaining that commercial land. So I think probably better than going into a lot of detail on it. One thing I would, one other thing I'd like to mention, Bryce mentioned our comment about the comments from the Fair Housing Authority, and I've already talked to Bryce about this, but I wanted to, for you and for the record, apologize to you for, we had misinterpreted that whole email string. It was kind of confusing and it looked as though there had something happened that obviously didn't. And again, I want to apologize to both the Planning Commission and to Bryce for misinterpreting that. But we're willing to go ahead with our alternative 3. We'd like to talk a little more about some of the screening requirements. I think that the zoning requires where we can talk about further. We can answer any questions you've got among all of us that are here. So rather than me going on a whole lot longer, I think maybe I'll just ask if there's any questions we can answer about our alternative or any other issues you've got regarding the proposal.
Okay, I'm looking at the screen. Is there, just for clarification while people are raising hand, Commissioner Pollack, I see you, I'll get to you next. Are you amending this application, or after hearing what Bryce said about needing to enter a conversation about a zone, you know, an adjustment to those setbacks through a different process, are you suggesting that we withdraw and you go back to staff and you have a new application that with those adjustments for those setbacks?
Oh, I think there's 2 elements to that. One is that we are willing and are proposing to withdraw the application on the commercial portion, that the building would remain a legal non-conforming use. And given that we don't expect to be moving or expanding that building anytime in the near or the foreseeable future, we can live with that. I guess we'd have to talk about a little bit about the logistics and how we would modify the application on the RM portion, if that would require a new application, or if we can just suggest that the zone change comp plan amendment only apply to those 4 tax lots in the southwest corner that we'd like to change from RM2 to PS.
Well, why don't we hold that thought and we'll get some more questions for you. And then maybe Lisa or Bryce, you can chime in and suggest the best way to go forward. Commissioner Pollack, followed by Commissioner Schweikart.
Okay, you can hear me, right?
Yes, sure can.
Okay, so in preparing, I thought we were going to deliberate, but in preparing, there's like 5 dates that pop out, and I just want to clarify with you. In 1970, the staff's research saying that in 1970, back as far as 1970, there's a comprehensive plan map and comprehensive plan now language. It says that where you have your operation, it was CG so you were non-conforming from the day you built this building. Is that, from what I understand? And because it says here, when we had that last interview, you told me that you acquired the property in 1970, which now we know since 1971, but we now know that since 1970 it was CG. And then in June 11, 1984, the neighborhood plan came in and reiterated the CG area, and that was after you bought the top 4, your northern properties. And then in 1988, you said you acquired the rest of the property, and then in 1990, in the 1990s, the that multiple family study was done, and from there they rezoned. Oh yeah, the multifamily resident land study was done, and from there they rezoned. My question to you is, when the comprehensive plan came in 84 and the rezoning due to the 1990 residential study, were you given notice about the zone change, and did you participate in that process and talk about your concerns or objections or anything? Did you go through an appeals process? Did you file any kind of suit? I mean, did you do anything to sort of rectify the situation that you were in when the notices came out of these proposed zone changes?
As far as the multifamily residential piece, I've gone back and looked through our records as far as I can find. I know from my experience, the city is very careful about making correct notice on these things. The only thing I can say is when the zoning for the multifamily piece like came in, I believe around 1998 with the Smurfel study. I don't have any record that we received it, but again, I'm not going to say that we didn't, because frankly, I haven't kept my records back that far. So I can't really say other than if it came through, we may have looked at it. We didn't have any particular use for the property at that time. The facility was working pretty well. As far as we know, we don't know exactly. We've been looking and we've been asking our real estate people, a number of others. We're not exactly sure when the building was built. As I indicated in our presentation at the last public hearing, we know the building was there in 1994, but we don't know exactly how much farther back it goes.
Oh,
But
okay.
as you stated, and as I stated back then, we did, based on the assessor's records, that we purchased basically the commercial parcels on it around 1971. The remainder, it's hard to tell. The records are kind of hard to follow, but around 1988. So what you related, Commissioner Pollock, is consistent with my knowledge of the situation.
Okay, so the only thing
From our research.
the only thing that I got wrong was that the building wasn't constructed in 1971 when you bought the property, because you don't know when it was constructed, but you know that in the 80s, because of tax assessor record, you know that it was at least there in the 80s.
Well, we know it was there. We know for sure based on an air photo from 1994 that it was there in 1994.
Okay.
And that's the best record we've been able to find so far. And again, we've had several conversations with our facilities and real estate people, and we apparently don't have great records on when the building was constructed.
Okay, I really thank you for this. It's just, I need to get an historical thing. I mean, I want to make sure that I'm accurate when I go to take a look, at the end of the day. Thank you.
Commissioner Schweikart.
Hi, thanks. My question was in regards to the comments with responding to the options for alternative approval with conditions. I just wanted to understand and be great if you're able to point out on this map that we already have up in our sharing where the access points are that you mentioned there being a conflict with the setback requirements and access to into and out of the site.
The access where the major conflict would occur is the one, and I think Bryce is pointing to it right now, is on the north side of the building. That's a card lock gated entrance. It's also, as I understand it, I can ask Laura to confirm this, that it's sometimes difficult for the larger trucks to get through there as it is. As we understood the landscape requirements, it would require a 5-foot landscape buffer along the northern property line up to that fence, widening out to 10 feet inside the fence. Basically, it would, with that much area taken out of the way, there wouldn't be enough room for the trucks that use that gate to get through there. And we'd have to spend a significant amount of money to completely refigure that entrance to allow the large delivery trucks, especially for those large variable message signs like you see hanging over freeways, to get through there. That's the major issue as far as access goes with the landscaping or the setbacks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, additional questions? So Lisa and or Bryce, where do you think we should go from here? I think the alternative 3 is a new part of the conversation that doesn't sound like it's been totally fully baked with staff, and whether or not we need to have a different approach with an adjustment in addition to the proposed zone change. So what would you advise?
Well, Lisa, did you want to, or Natasha, did you want to handle that in terms of the logistics of, if it's a different proposal? I don't, as I'd indicated, there is no way to deviate, from a standard in the code, without, going through the process. So, if there was a desire to, have something less than the required, setbacks next to the street and adjacent to the, to the different interior property lines, again, that would be something that would require a new application to be added to this. And so that would certainly, require, renotice and kind of start the process anew, at least, with this adjustment being added to it in a new map. If it was an issue of not asking for deviation from the development standards, I think, and Lisa and Natasha, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the Planning Commission could, approve an alternative, because the request is still applies to the request is still applicable to this block, and they're still asking for, PS zone. It's just, to what extent is the PS zone applied on the block? So I think, there could be a decision that would allow a different configuration of the zoning, on the site, on the block, if it was, either one of staff's alternatives that we had recommended, or the applicant's alternative, that would be possible without having to necessarily do a renotice. But if there was again, correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa and Natasha, if there was an application to adjust and reduce standards, that would require, starting, essentially new and sending new notice out for this entire now consolidated, case with a comp plan zone change and adjustments.
Yeah, I would concur with that. And also, if they want to request adjustments for future development, that doesn't have to be combined with this application. So I think their proposal is an expansion onto this PS zone property that would require site plan review. That's where we apply all of the development standards that would apply to whatever they're proposing. And that's when we would apply the setbacks and the landscaping. And so through that application, which has its own process and notification requirements, they could ask for an adjustment through that process.
So in theory, this is just in theory, we could make a motion to take this third option from the applicant to change it to a PS zone. And then the rest of the conversation happens later during the site plan review. Is that too simple? Okay, that's not too simple.
No, that's correct.
Okay.
Under staff's alternatives, where we had alternative one, which was to change, a portion of the site, where it's more, the north half is PS and the south half is RM2, that would require, adjustments in order to be approved, because it's the existing site. And for instance, if you're going to move the line, let me share my screen again here. So under staff's alternative, one, which was leaving that, again, the north half, they're changing the north half to PS and leaving the south half generally to RM2, it would require establishing a new zone boundary line generally in this area. And that would, and you can't establish that line, a new line, when there's a required 20-foot setback between the PS zone and the RM2 zone without going through a process. So I think under staff's alternatives, because it applied to existing and potentially and new, then it would require a renotice, because it's not just new development that's occurring. But under the applicant's alternative, if it's just to apply to these ones here, the site is generally undeveloped. Anything new that would occur here, the paving and everything for the storage area, that would trigger the perimeter landscaping requirements. And I would also note that it would still, you'd have RM2 here adjacent to the east. And so that would require a 20-foot, landscape, setback, between the PS zone and the abutting, RM2 zone over here. So that there would be a 20-foot setback that would, come in and then go down, because you'd have PS zoning abutting RM2 zoning.
Okay, I have another question for you, Bryce. Do you feel like staff has had enough time to provide us the information we need to go into deliberations on this? Because an option would be to continue the hearing.
I think, I think at any time, if there's the ability to, think about, things and consider things, and more thoroughly, it's always good, so I, certainly, would support if the planning commission feels that, yeah, they need to consider this as well, because, this is a new alternative and there hasn't been a lot of time, to evaluate it, and staff hasn't had a chance to kind of, evaluate, what could be the potential pitfalls with it. So yeah, so certainly additional time, could be a benefit to have a more comprehensive look at it.
Okay. We're in questions of staff at the moment. I do see that we have a question for ODOT. I'll come back to the applicant. I'm just going to take that liberty to do that after we finish questions of staff. So Commissioner Schweikart, followed by Commissioner Pollock, and then I'll get to you, Matt, I promise, after Levin. So Schweikart, Pollock, and Levin.
My question has to do with the alternative conditions for alternative 1 and 2 with regards to the setbacks that are part of the requirements for the PS zone. Has there been a precedent for in the past for requiring that a owner comply with the applicable setback requirements if they do move forward with any sort of reconstruction, new construction work done on the site, as opposed to making them comply with those setbacks at this time when there is no proposal for new construction or reconstruction to be done?
Yeah, so I think like as Lisa indicated, whenever you have new development, whatever new is added has to conform to the requirements of the code. So where ODOT would want to expand into the, to the undeveloped, portion of the site, certainly there is precedent for, through the development process that any new development you do has to meet the requirements of the code. I think, in terms of the existing, development, the use is such that and it gets back to kind of, is the site suitable for a PS zone when you have an area that's kind of designated for, commercial and neighborhood serving type of uses. And so if you have this kind of, it's a public use, but it is, in the way it functions, it's more of like an industrial use where there's things stored, trucks coming in and out. And so as in the northern, as kind of a northern gateway into the city, we have this kind of development that kind of, in a way, today looks out of place with medical office and the restaurant uses, and the retail uses to the north, and it's large. And so I think, if we just changed the zoning today to PS and didn't have any condition to bring it into conformance, ODOT may not do anything on this property for years, and then we'll never see any kind of, improvement on that northern portion. We'd potentially get the new improvements in the landscaping on the south, but you'd have this existing, use that wouldn't have the benefit of having that screening. So in this case, I think it's warranted, because they're changing from commercial to this public zone where it's, you have a lot of vehicle storage and vehicle use, that the standards of the PS zone that would apply if it were just like new development should apply, to change, the zoning of the property in order to minimize its impacts to the surrounding area and help it fit.
Okay, can I have a follow-up?
You sure may.
Should the commission choose to move forward with one of the kind of staff alternatives or the applicant alternative, I wanted to again kind of think about the precedent involved in providing a condition that is, that these adjustments are only specific to this particular development proposal. I believe that we have approved conditions like that in the past.
Yeah, that would be, but again, that would have to be like a new application coming in with the adjustments. So we wouldn't recommend approving, the comp plan zone change subject to getting adjustments after the fact, because, the adjustments, they're heard by a different, if they came in separately, they're reviewed by the planning administrator. If they're appealed, they don't go to the planning commission, they go to, the hearings officer, so it could potentially, be something that's denied. And so we've changed the zone for, an application because we could send notice for an adjustment and neighbors are really concerned about, having, the setbacks, from in the screening reduced in some fashion. So there may be concerns about that. So we wouldn't want a situation where we have the zone change approved with a condition that says you have to get adjustments subsequently when those adjustments, have a separate process that could result in, not being approved. So they need to kind of come, either the adjustments would have to happen, before, the comp plan zone change, or, well, I guess it couldn't really happen before because you'd be looking for a new zone. Essentially, they'd have to come together, to request a deviation from the setbacks of the PS zone. So we wouldn't want to approve an adjustment or a condition or approve this comp plan zone change with a condition to get adjustments after the fact. We would need, if any of the alternatives that are selected by the planning commission require a deviation from the standards, it would require the applicant to, submit an additional adjustment request. We'd have to send new notice for the application and then, come back to the planning commission as with that consolidated case.
To follow up, Commissioner Schweikart, because I think I understand what you're asking is, could the commission approve the CG or the public zone on the developed property and not require all this landscaping and setbacks? And the answer to that is yes.
Yeah.
Right. So for the developed area, we're recommending if you approve the zone change for the developed area, that you make them come into conformance with the zone as a condition of approval, because we think that would be necessary to meet the criteria for the comp plan zone change. The commission could decide to just approve that request without those conditions, right? It would be non-conforming development, but it would be a permitted use. You can't waive the landscaping and setback to the undeveloped portions, because when those come in for development, we have to apply the zoning code, or they have to ask for an adjustment at that time. So I'm not sure if that's what you're trying to ask. We have in the past sometimes applied, like we're recommending now, conditions to mitigate the zone change. And so that's what we were trying to do with those landscaping conditions, is to say, if you are going to approve it, we think the landscaping and the screening should be improved up to what the zone would require if they were to develop today. But the commission could decide, no, we think it meets the criteria for this comp plan zone change without those extra conditions, and you could approve it the way they requested it without those conditions.
Okay, yeah, no, I appreciate that information. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Pollock, followed by Levin and then Slater.
So I think if we were to have this whole site as PS zoned, I think isn't it compelling information that on the north side of the property where they have that fence, I mean, these are trucks that are bringing these large signs and things down. So I think there's a real compelling argument that they need that space for the trucks. So if you're going back to if we continue this, would that be a discussion that you could have to maybe, again, if we approve it, it's approve it with the conditions, but maybe that condition might be a little bit tweaked because of that compelling argument about the trucks?
This is Bryce Bishop again. Let me just clarify real quick. So the condition on the north is that a 5-foot landscape setback has to be provided along the entire north property line. The section that is west of the gate, it's still 5 feet, but there has to be a hedge within the 5-foot setback because it's now a storage area. To the east of the gate, it's I think mainly vehicle use, so it's like access. But then once you get beyond the gate, that's where the storage area occurs. So that's why we say 5 feet with a hedge, and then 5 feet. So 5 feet landscaping east of the gate. 5 feet landscaping with a hedge, side obscuring hedge within it 6 feet west of the gate.
Okay, hold on, because I think I saw on here. Okay, so it's condition 1B setbacks, northern property, minimum 5-foot landscaping shall be along the northern property line for portions of the north property. And then it says, and to west of the existing gate, the 6-foot side of obscuring hedge. So how far back is that fence?
You know, when you look at an aerial photo, it appears that the fence, you know, is there's an offset, you know, from the north property line, like the fence isn't on the property line. I have a feeling that there could be an, you know, kind of a little bit of a discrepancy from the angle of the aerial photo, you know, but, you know, it does appear, you know, that the landscaping, you know, I think for the commercial development that they probably put in, you know, the landscaping strip, it appears that that's on ODOT's property, you know, but, you know, they would have to have, you know, a 5-foot, you know, landscape setback in order to meet the code from their north property line in, you know, so I don't know exactly, you know, where the property line exists out there in relation to the existing improvements. The aerial photo makes it look like, you know, there's a little bit of an offset, but again, I don't know if that's accurate or not. It could.
Well, so that's my question. Can you like work with them to get the information about where that fence is, if it's 5 feet back, or if it's within 3 feet, and then in front of it a little hedge or something along that line? Because I think for the most part, I think the only issue that I have with setbacks is just that pre-existing fence that's been there for 2 years without the city saying anything about that fence. And then the need for it to have that, you know, area wide enough for the big trucks. Now, I don't have any issues with the side obscuring hedge unless unless that area is needed for the trucks to back up or something like that. But that's the thing that I was concerned with, is maybe you need to, if we do continue it, can you get together and just deal with what's going on with the fence?
So let me, Commissioner Pollack, let me just, you know, clarify. So there's the issue with the you know, the north property line and the gate, and whether, you know, there was 10 feet required west of the gate or 5 feet. I think the condition is clear that it's 5 feet. Now, you're talking about the new fence. I believe the new fence that ODOT is speaking of is, you know, down here, you know, in the RM2 zone portion of the site.
Oh, that new fence.
Where, you know, this other fence, I think, has been there for probably quite some time.
Yeah.
But
So
the new one that they did, I think, is down in this area.
okay, so this new fence up here, that's what I need. I would like to know if that's within, if that's within the 5 feet, like if it's 5 feet and then it has landscaping in front that would just basically, you know, work with the current setbacks you're asking to, or if it's a little less than, and it might need us to adjust it for it to just sort of we sort of, you know, just take on that fence as it existed since it's been there that long. Now, the fence on the fence on the bottom there, that's only the thing that I had for that one that's 2 years old, is that they put that fence there knowing that that they were non-conforming, and if they didn't check to see what rules were there for, you know, I have another issue with that. I mean, I think that they, you know, I think that an argument could be made that they should have been a little bit more diligent in finding out if they could put that fence there and what or not. So, but that's another argument for in deliberations. I'm really just concerned about that north fence. That's all.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Levin, then followed by Commissioner Slater.
Thank you. Bryce, can you shed any light on the question about when that building was built?
So without looking at building permit records, it's been there. It predated ODOT's use, I believe. I think it was a pre-existing building that ODOT purchased, and so the ODOT did, I don't believe, constructed it. So if they purchased it in the 70s, I'm assuming, and if it's continued, I can bring additional information for the record. But I think if ODOT bought it as an existing building, it predated the 70s, has a different use.
Okay. Interesting.
Follow up? Okay. Commissioner Slater?
No follow-up.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Slater?
Thank you. So Bryce, just to clarify, or perhaps this is more a question for President Chain. Right now, the staff recommendation is that we deny the application because it's a non-conforming use. If we're entertaining one of the three proposals, alternate proposals, the two provided by staff or the one suggested by the applicant, I assume that if we entertain those, then we have either not moved the staff report or we've substituted something for the staff report. Is that correct?
Yeah, what we'll do when we'll either continue the hearing because we feel like we need more information from staff, or we'll close the hearing and go into the deliberations. And then Vice President McKinley will make a motion. Depending on what that motion is, we'll either, go with that one, or but we'll have a conversation within the commission. So we could easily have a different outcome.
Thank you. And I guess then for Bryce, just in clarification, Bryce, the landscape proposals in the staff alternatives, those are standard proposals for the zoning. Is that correct?
Yes, those are the standard requirements that would be required for development in the PS zone.
Okay, so none of this is customized to the particular site or involves staff discretion?
No.
Thank you. That was it for me.
Thank you. Any more questions of staff before we go to applicant rebuttal? We'll have one more opportunity for clarification from staff after the applicant rebuts the comments that have been made. So would ODOT like to, I think, Mr. Hasty, you have your hand raised.
Testimony before
You're
the,
muted, Matt.
actually not, just a sec.
There you go. We can hear you better now.
Oh,
There you
good.
go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, great, thanks. Yeah, I'm not at home. As Dan said, I'm in Colorado on a couch in my daughter's new college apartment. So technology not the best for me right now. But anyway, so I had just a couple of comments or maybe clarifications. I think one, I'd also say I appreciate all the questions about kind of the existing CG zone, the northern part of the site. I really do think at this point, kind of given the potential requirements would be associated with rezoning that, there's not a ton of benefit to ODOT for rezoning that. And that's why we suggested in our alternative 3 that we just simply withdraw that part of the application. We actually, in conversations amongst ourselves, went back and forth quite a bit about whether to include that at all in this application. And ultimately we've said, well, hey, it'd be good if this was a conforming use and if the sort of, in our opinion, the appropriate designation was applied to this property, given what the use is and has been for quite some time. But at the same time, it doesn't help us much. It's not a big deal if that just stays CG. And if that helps the city in terms of the way the land is zoned, and we get to keep doing what we're doing on that part of the site, not a compelling reason for rezoning. So I wanted to note that. And then I also wanted to note that in terms of, Bryce had talked about kind of shifting the line that's just south of kind of the southeastern portion of the site. Yep, right there, shifting that to the south. We did not suggest that in our third alternative because we were trying to, again, based on what we heard in the staff report and at the last meeting, retain at least a good sized chunk of that property in that MF or that RM2 zone. That made sense to us. And if this were developed in the future and we don't expect it to be while ODOT owns the property. But if it were in the future, it seems like it would make sense if ODOT wasn't there for as much of that site as possible to stay in that RM2 zone and be developed, and for us not to have to go through the effort of moving that property line and shifting the zoning there. And then the third thing I would note is that, we, for the portion, the southwest portion that we're proposing to have rezoned to the PS designation, we did look at how much space would be left after the open space setback areas, and determined that that would still give us enough space for ODOT to do what it needs to do on that part of the site. So we assumed that, there would need to be an open space setback around that portion of the site. Our reason for suggesting some kind of flexibility in how that is done was simply because, as we noted, that fence has not been in place very long. It would be great if we didn't have to just pick up and move that fence. If we had some flexibility on where the plantings or any required hedge or anything like that went in there, whether or not we could make that fence site obscuring instead of plant a hedge, we just thought, hey, that might make some sense in terms of having some flexibility or efficiency there. And I'm not speaking for ODOT when I say this next thing, but maybe it's fine, for us to just not worry about that right now. Again, we had assumed there would be a buffer around that portion of the site that we wouldn't be able to use. And if it's going to require kind of going back for a new application and reopening the hearing, maybe that's worthwhile. Maybe it's not. I don't know. And maybe Dan has some thoughts on that. But I just wanted to kind of note all those things in terms of what we were thinking when we identified that alternative 3. So hopefully that kind of helps at least clarify our reasoning there. That's all I had. And I don't know, Dan, if you want to add to that.
Not a whole lot. Matt's correct that we did do, or his staff did a lot of work to figure out, based on the conditions that were proposed in the staff report, how much additional setback would be required, and we concluded there would be enough room there. I'd like to know one thing about the fence on the southern half of the property that Commissioner Pollack, I believe, mentioned. That fence was put up primarily for security. We were having some problems with especially some homeless camping and other on the things like that on the grass portion of the site. That led to some potential for some vandalism on the property. So that's the basic reason that fence was put up. It appears, and I haven't been out there in a while, but I know when I looked at it, that especially on the commercial street side, it looks like it's roughly 6 to 7 feet inside the property line. And that's based on where the utility poles are, which are generally along property lines. I don't know for sure that that's the case, but I think we tried to keep the fence inside the existing property line as much as possible. So I could mention some things about the landscaping based on the photo and other things on the north side, but I think I'll leave that for later if there's more questions about that.
Okay. Do we have questions of the applicant in their rebuttal? Not seeing any hands raised. Thank you, Dan and Matt. Commissioner Pollack. This is a question
Yes,
of that.
yes. Okay. So, yeah, the northern fence, well, it's been there for a while where the gate is. Do you have any idea how far back that fence is from your property line?
I don't know where it is in relation to the property. I think the white line on the map that's in front of you actually shows the landscape strip inside the ODOT property, and it's not. The fence is where I assumed the property line was, and the landscaping is actually on the commercial property side. It looks like a 5 to 6 foot landscape strip on the north side of the fence.
Oh, so it's not on the outside.
And there isn't any landscaping. Our pavement goes right up to the fence line. So, and again, I've made the assumption as I've reviewed this that the fence is on the property line, unless Laura or Galen are aware of any deal they made when the commercial site came in as far as giving up some property for landscaping. that white line should actually be moved on the other side of what appears to be the landscape strip on the north side.
Follow up, Commissioner Pollock?
No, I just, again, more information needs to be clarified that, because I think if, and not liking the quilted, like we've been saying since a long time that we don't like to create little patchworks in our zoning maps. And so if we were to create this entire property as PS, I just was concerned that maybe we could do something about the standard for that northern property, because that fence has been there quite some time, and because it's compelling that they need as much space as possible for the big trucks to come in that gate. So that's the only thing that I was just concerned with, was where that fence is actually. But I think that for me, I think more information, I think somebody needs to go out there and get a real assurance as where's the property line, where the fence is, and how does that relate to what the staff is asking for the setback, and can we compromise, have some kind of compromise there?
Okay. Additional questions of staff at this time? So we're at a juncture now. If we feel like we need more time to have specific questions for staff answered, Commissioner Pollock has thrown out a few ideas that she had, then we can have a motion to continue the hearing. If, on the other hand, you feel like you have enough information to make a decision tonight, I'll close the hearing and we can move into deliberations. So at this time, is there a motion to continue the hearing? Commissioner Pollock?
Yes, I would like to move. I'd like to submit a motion to continue the hearing.
Okay, I would need a second and then we would vote after we discuss. Do I have a second? Not seeing a second.
Okay.
So we'll just move on to closing the hearing. So I have closed the hearing. Commissioner McKinley.
Madam President, I move that we adopt the report.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second.
And that was, I
Commissioner
can't
Slater.
see. Thank you very much. So second by Slater. Okay, let's discuss, and using, raise your hand, please.
Okay.
Come on, you guys are never this bashful.
Wait, yeah.
Okay, we'll start with Commissioner Kopcho. In queue behind Kopcho is Slater, then Swikart and Pollock.
Can you actually skip me? I'm sorry. I raised my hand a little too preemptively.
Sure, no problem. We will move to Commissioner Slater and then Commissioner Schweikart.
Thank you. So I'm inclined to support the staff recommendation because I'm not interested, or I'm not supportive of expanding the existing non-complying activity. So that's where I am at the moment. I look forward to hearing what my other colleagues have to say about that. I think if we do decide to move ahead with the application or consider a new application, I do think it's important that we apply the landscaping standards that go along with that zoning change. So, but for the moment, I intend to support the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Schweikart.
Okay. I guess I would say that my and I'm welcoming conversation back and forth here. I would say that my initial comments would be that I would actually not support the staff recommendation at this time. I feel like there is a lot of layers that have gone on throughout the history of this site that have got us to where we are, that makes it a little more complicated. First you have the fact that, as Commissioner Pollock was just saying, you don't really like to have like spot zoning of one random zone or use in a sea of other types of uses. That's not, you know, a good urban planning practice, right? So, you know, that's not beneficial to the community to have kind of the one random piece that's zoned something that's outside of the character of the neighborhood. At the same time, ODOT has been there for decades, continues to want to utilize the land for its existing purpose. And the Highland Neighborhood Association has stated that they have no problem with that and are fully on board with the continuation of those uses. So, you know, there's those two things that kind of to weigh in the balance of one another. Additionally, and this is in no way a negative comment against current city staff, because I highly doubt that any of you 20 years ago were the folks that were part of this Smurfles planning effort. But I find that rezoning this particular piece of land to multifamily at that time, again, feels to me sort of like spot zoning. Got to be honest with you. I think that at the time it was, you know, where this community is situated, or how it was developed back, you know, 25 years ago. I don't think that made a whole lot of sense to rezone that property. And I know that the city staff now today is simply trying to use the history of that document that was created and that ordinance that was passed, and that's what you have to work with, and therefore you're working within those constraints. And I understand that. However, at the same time, I don't think that it's realistic to assume that this particular piece of multifamily zone land is going to lead to the actual creation of some sort of multifamily development on it. And the reasons I think were pretty clear from our hearing last time, which is that, one, it's owned by ODOT, and ODOT does not foresee partaking in any sort of multifamily housing development themselves. And therefore they would basically just be forced to sell that piece of land in order for it actually to be created into multifamily housing, which I don't think that that's a precedent that we would want to set, to force a state agency to have to sell their land. And so, you know, I think that there's a kind of somewhat of a calamity of errors in terms of how this site came to be in its current uses and zoning. And we have to figure out how to move forward. I think that what I would personally just state is that the recommendation that the applicant provided for alternative number 3, I suppose we are calling it, the reason why I don't find that to be a viable alternative is because the multifamily use, like I said, I already don't think it's a great use to begin with on this site. I think that making it even smaller actually makes it even less viable as a site for multifamily development. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I'm speaking as someone who builds multifamily housing day in and day out as an affordable housing developer. And I will say that, you know, I do not think that even if ODOT wanted to sell that land, it would be very difficult for an affordable housing developer or a market rate multifamily housing developer to build on such a small piece of land in a way that would be financially viable. So I think that we might actually be creating another problem while trying to solve for this problem. So, you know, that's the reason why it doesn't strike me as, I know that it was a compromise that was it was an offering of a compromise, and I get that, and I thank ODOT for trying to make that work. I simply think we'd be replacing one problem with another with regards to the viability for multifamily housing of such a small piece of land. So those are kind of my thoughts, and I would say that if I were to so I guess I will say that the motion that is before us, I would be voting no. So I will wait before then submitting any sort of alternative motion.
Okay, sounds good. Let's go to Commissioner Kopcho and then Commissioner Pollock.
Could we do it the other way around?
We sure could. I'll
thank
go
you.
to Commissioner Pollock and then I'll go to Commissioner Kopcho.
Okay, I have three issues, and just follow me. Again, the critical dates are 1970 when it became commercial general, 1971 when ODOT bought the top four property, June 1984 when the neighborhood plan came into play, 88 when they bought the bottom half, and then the 1990s when they rezoned because of this study. So those are key dates there. So my first issue is that, first of all, in looking at the argument that ODOT did the last time, they said the Highland Neighborhood Plan dates back from 1904, therefore it's archaic and out of date in relations to how the area has changed. Well, I have two issues on that. Number one, Salem Revised Code 64, which is the comprehensive plan 010E, says under the rules of construction that no particular weight shall be accorded to any portion of the comprehensive plan by reason of the date of its enactment. And then 64 0.5B5 is neighborhood plan goals and policies and maps are a part of the comprehensive plan. So just because the neighborhood plan was adopted in 1984 does not give it any less weight or more weight than what we have before us as a guiding document. And so I think that their argument there that it's so old it fails. But to tell you the truth, it actually was very forward thinking. I mean, Salem has not been historically a hotbed of smart growth. But if you really take a look at the Highland Plan, it envisions along the waterfront an industrial, along the middle a commercial general, to have supported service to the next part of the zone, which is residential. And so I think it's taken decades. I mean, it's not until the last decade or so that we actually had those supportive services, the Applebee's, the medical facility, the strip mall with the Adam's ribs and the coffee and the other things that are in there. So, I mean, it's taken a while for that vision to come to fruition. So even though it's an old plan, it actually was a visionary to, and so I think it's coming to fruition. So I think ODOT would have had a lot stronger argument is in the old days when it was empty to say, hey, there's nothing there now, let's change it to PS or whatever, than it does now, because like the staff says, the surrounding development is commercial general and is supportive service for the residential. So that's issue number one. Issue number two is like unreasonable delay. I think I kind of already alluded to this when I asked the question is, if you're of unreasonable delay in inserting your objections to the matter of the non-conforming status, I mean, if you have notice of the fact that your area was CG when you bought it, that your operation is going to be non-conforming, then in 1984, the neighborhood plan comes in, and then again in 1990, rezoning the bottom half residential. And again, I kind of agree with you that there's strong historical evidence that the city wouldn't do that without one doing due process, notice, opportunity to be heard, appeal, or if you felt there was a proportional issue, to just file a lawsuit on unconstitutional grounds. So I think that's what they really call that, like, and if I'm talking to the attorney room, it's latches, is when you sit on your rights and you do nothing, we shouldn't reward you for that. But then there's another age-old doctrine called acquiescence. And the thing is, when the city for all this time knows that these guys are operating non-conforming, that they're doing all these things, and they never tell them anything, in other words, my worry is that when they were operating this thing, were they grandfathered in? Were they allowed to do those operations? Because, in 1984, when the 1984, if they were operating during that time of the neighborhood plan, were they grandfathered in? That means they would have relied on the fact that they were grandfathered in not to stand up for their rights. We don't know that. Well, there's absolutely no evidence in here. There's got to be, something. But again, the other case is that there's not sufficient evidence that the city had I mean, there's sufficient evidence that this city had both active and constructive notice that they were engaging in non-conforming use on the land, and that they're buying the land and that they were using it non-conforming when they changed it to residential, and they didn't do anything on it. And I think what they do is they might have made the ODOT feel like their operation was okay and the city was okay with it. So that's the acquisition. And the same thing with the fence, even though the bottom fence is new for 2 years, they didn't do anything about the fence either. So, you know, it's to the city through its conduct, or it's expressed or implied. I think they consented to the action of the ODOT. So I think we're going to have a hard time saying now, oh, we want you to, we want to keep this bottom half residential. And I totally 100% agree with Commissioner Swihart that that is one nasty piece of property to try to develop to multifamily between another non-conforming industrial to the south and industrial to the left, and then another sort of business to the right. I just don't think I think that there won't be a lot of developers that are going to want to buy that property. And the last third issue is that, and this is to ODOT, when the government operates as a market participant, they got to follow all the rules. Yeah, developers don't like setbacks either. Yeah, they're costly, but that's the cost of doing business. I think it's this. I will vote against the staff report. I would like this to be all public public service. But again, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you're going to have public service, you're going to need to do all the setbacks and things that it should be, with the exception of what's going on with that northern fence, because that was a compelling argument about needing the room for the trucks. So that's my no on my vote was going to be no, and I, like Commissioner Swihart, would welcome some other offers to have the entire thing. And again, that last number 3, I don't like quilt work. I don't like quilt work in our Salem planning. We kind of tried to get away from that. So I would really hate myself if I was part of that. So that's it for me.
Okay, Commissioner Kopcho, are you ready?
I am. I had an unexpected child interruption the last.
Oh,
yes.
God.
Thank you, pandemic, for having me work in my office here. So thanks for bearing with me also.
You bet.
I'll try to cut my comments a little short. I plan to, I feel disinclined to overturn the staff recommendation to deny. So I guess I feel inclined to agree with the staff report. For a number of reasons, surprisingly, a number of reasons that Commissioner Pollack just raised, although they lead me down a different path or to a different conclusion. But ultimately, I feel like it's our role on the Planning Commission to promote growth and orderly development of the city. And to do that, we rely on the comprehensive plan, which represents that orderly and efficient development to meet the future needs of the community. And so, taking that into context, the zoning as is, and without the burden of proof, I don't feel like being met for conformance to statewide planning goals 9 and 10 and the logical urbanization of the land. I just don't see any way that I would agree with or not agree with the staff recommendation to denial. So I would be in favor of the report. That's it.
Okay. Other comments? Commissioner Levin.
Oh, I was unmuted the whole time. Sorry if anyone heard my child yelling in the background. I'll try to talk over her in the as I try to express all my thoughts and keep stuff in order. I commend the applicant and staff for giving us something that really stretched the mental capacity to track with, to keep dates correct, and to keep the rules that we're supposed to operate by in front of us on this one, as this is really mentally challenging. And I so that being said, I will not, I don't support staff's recommendation. I will vote against that. And I too, I would welcome an alternative motion. And I feel dumb now because as I've listened to enough deliberations, I actually would have seconded Commissioner Pollack's motion for a continuance to force the parties to come up with some different resolutions. But I would like to, if I can keep things in order, from what staff said, specifically Bryce, about the recommendation that was made in the earlier, or the question that was raised by me in the earlier hearing about allowing the PS zone with a requirement to revert the zone at the end of their occupancy or when they sell. And there was comments made that that the city staff didn't see that as being a viable option because of a few things, and I would counter some of those arguments. So regularly public lands are sold, and they're sold with their public designation on them, and so it's it rarely is the public entity that controls that land obligated to revert it to a private use, which inherently has a higher net worth. So and what ties into that is nothing other than public use can go on PS land. So no matter where it goes, and we understanding that we do need some components of that in our community, that is a zone that inherently will be a patchwork zone, because we will have the city shops over on 22nd, and then we will have ODOT's facility over here, and then we'll have the Marion County operations. It's not like those will all develop uniformly in a PS designated area, much like the South McGill Crest to 25th kind of industrial area, similar to residential zones expanding, et cetera. So that's why I think the concept that I raised actually does make sense as creating a precedent with this hearing, that requiring ODOT, allowing them the change to the PS zone, but requiring them to revert it to whatever is applicable at that time, Bryce, it would suffice what is needed and clearly has been operated for decades. So the next thought is one of the let's see, earlier comments, Commissioner Slater had commented about the occupancy being not conforming, and I just want to comment to that existing non-conforming is a definable term as it relates to an operation much like this that his took on a property that appears, from what we can see, was pseudo-industrial at one time, and it no longer is, as a matter of fact, of change, or as we see some very arbitrary zone changes by the local municipality. So that's what existing non-conforming means. It doesn't mean that I guess I don't want there to be an assumption that existing non-conforming maybe means that something was done dubiously. That can just occur just by the nature of redevelopment in an area. So if I was to make a proposal at this point for a recommendation, and people can shoot this down or chew this over, change it, but I do appreciate the applicant's alternative 3 and what it does in sufficing their needs. And I would agree that the surrounding area is not going to be likely developed as multifamily because of adjacent properties, and then further complicating that by reducing the size of what that corner square would be. Duplex, triplex, yeah, there's a smaller pool of residential developers that'll do that. So in that area, that size, it's probably just going to be just bare land as for several more decades until the state does decide to dispose of it. So I would entertain some discussion about a motion, amended motion, or a new motion that involves the option 3, or just a flat out rezone of the entire parcel to PS, with the state basically having to then meet all current setback standards.
Okay.
So
Let's hold that
those are my
thought.
thoughts.
Yeah, those are all good comments. Let's hold that discussion on a different motion, and let's talk about this one, and let's vote on this one just for clarity. I know we can do an amended motion, but it's such a complex conversation. I would love to just deal with this motion, and then we'll open it up to a different motion if the one on the table does not pass. Is that okay, Commissioner Levin?
Sounds good to me.
Okie dokie. Commissioner Slater has his hand raised.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to the comment, Commissioner Levin's comment about existing non-conforming, and note that I am aware of the way existing non-conforming is being used, and I was not under the impression that ODOT was doing something dubious. I am, however, concerned that expanding the facility is not consistent with the current comprehensive plan and the neighborhood plan. And since it's now before us, I think it's an opportunity to show that we are not, as Commissioner Pollack mentioned, acquiescing to the non-conforming use going forward. So that is my concern. I do understand that the facility has been there for quite a while, and there's a good case to be made there to continue its use, as well as the neighborhood support. I think if this motion does fail, I'll be voting for it, but if it does fail, I do think Commissioner Pollack's suggestion, Commissioner Levin's suggestion, that we move forward with one contiguous zoning designation, and the subsequent landscape requirements make sense in the alternative.
Thank you, Commissioner Copcho. Other
Slater.
comments, deliberation? Did you have a follow-up, Commissioner Copcho?
So that was Slater.
Yes. Do you have a follow-up?
I have something that I was going to say too. So
Okay.
kind of just to piggyback onto what Commissioner Slater was saying, is, when I look at this in terms of thinking, okay, well, if this gets voted down as currently recommended, and there's a thought process to make the whole thing PS instead of CG, where it's now CG, half CG and half multifamily. Commissioner Pollack talked about the visionary nature of the neighborhood plan, and I would say that visionary nature has yet to come to full fruition, where you do have things like the Applebee's, and you have things like the Starbucks, and things for citizen use, resident use. But we haven't quite got there yet. And when we look to the process that we're going through with our Salem and how we're planning to 2035 and beyond, I'm more inclined to take that look than how is it being used right now, even if it's been used the same way for the past 20 years, when we're speaking in terms of the comprehensive plan itself. And, in the last hearing, we asked the applicant, do you intend to build anything permanent on this new rezoned parcel? And the answer was no. There is no inclination at this time to do anything permanent. And quite honestly, in the era of the pandemic related budget cuts and shortfalls, I would be surprised if suddenly they were looking to build stuff on a newly rezoned plot. So it doesn't feel like there's enough reason to really rezone it to PS. And two, it just doesn't seem long-term to be the appropriate thing to do. So I can't bring myself to get behind that idea. So
I think this is just probably one of the toughest deliberations that we've had to go through in a few years.
It's fun to do it all remotely too.
It is. It's so fun. It's so fun to monitor it too. There've been good points raised on both sides to support the staff recommendation and to not support the staff recommendation. And I think that's what makes this a very challenging vote. Do we have other comments in deliberation? Commissioner Schweikart.
Right. Okay. I realized I was doing multiple actions at the same time. Okay, everyone can hear me. Great. Yeah, it is a very difficult decision because I fully understand where Commissioner Kopcho is coming from, and I agree that I think there was a comment made at the last hearing about the age of the neighborhood association's plan and that it hasn't been updated in decades. And part of me wants to say oh yeah, maybe there should be this effort to have them updated at a certain regularity so that it's still in keeping with what the neighborhood association itself and how it's comprised, how it feels about its neighborhood plan, right? We want folks to feel like it is that the neighborhood plan continues to reflect the nature of the population in that area that live there and work there. And at the same time, I was thinking, well, land use changes, especially land use changes over that large of a space, do take decades to come to fruition. You cannot expect quick changes. That's not the way that development works. Development works on a very long time frame. You have to see the vision that is being set out will not automatically be implemented quickly. So it's hard. I understand both, perspective that the neighborhood association's vision for this site, that we would want to continue to support it as it is currently shown in the neighborhood association's map. And then there's the thought, well, the current neighborhood association obviously does not feel particularly concerned with this particular site not conforming to its mapped use per the neighborhood plan map. So that's how do you move forward with that? And then the other point that I was thinking of was, we are in a unique position in the city of Salem of being in a state capital, and as such we have more than other cities in the state have to think about how we share this space with our fellow state agencies. I feel compelled as someone who used to work for a state agency to think about the expenditures that are taken on by a state agency having to make changes based on the local municipalities land use decisions. And I guess the comments that were made, and submitted as part of the testimony that was submitted on time, about the fact that there still remains this need, the need that ODOT has at this site will continue to exist. So are we saying by our actions that we are that we feel comfortable with the fact that need will continue to remain, and we are not going to allow any sort of, I guess, alleviation of the of the need, or that's what I'm really kind of concerned with, is the fact that this need that exists by a state agency to serve the populace of Salem and other parts of the state will continue to exist. And it seems as though the land use decision to change it so that it's no longer a non-conforming use and can be a conforming use is a compelling thing to do. So
Yeah, and I struggle with, I think in my head, it's either we move staff recommendation to deny or we move the original request to make it all PS, because I agree with Commissioner Pollock on the patch, not doing the patchwork on the zoning. We've tried really hard to avoid that where possible. I commend the applicant's willingness to try to come up with a solution with the RM2, but that's not really going to be very feasible. And then to have the 2 other zones. So I do appreciate that effort. I just struggle with what that would look like going forward. But more comments before we take a vote on the motion?
I have one more that's just
Is that a Commissioner Copcho?
it is Commissioner Copcho, just that more tongue in cheek than anything probably. But the thing that I find myself most inclined would be to make the whole thing CG, which is not really on the table. It just seems like the most appropriate zoning for what we're talking about. So
Oh, just go away, Commissioner Copcho.
I think it would make everyone mad, which feels like the right thing to do.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, great. Other comments, Commissioner Levin?
Yeah, so just to clarify, if the motion, if we, let's see.
The motion is
yeah, to approve staff's recommendation to reject. If we vote against that, does that then, are we automatically then approving the applicant's request on the original motion?
That is the original motion.
No, you would need a new motion.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You'd have
The
to give a
motion
new-
is to deny, or is to adopt staff's report, which is to deny what the applicant wants. And so that would fit, and then we would need a new motion.
Okay, just to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah. Other conversations before I call for the vote? Okay, I'm calling for the vote. Shelby, will you please do a roll call on the motion that was made by Commissioner McKinley, seconded by Commissioner Slater to adopt staff report?
Commissioner Augustine,
Here.
is it aye or nay or?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm approving. I agree with staff.
Okay, Commissioner Griggs,
Nay.
Commissioner Copcho,
Aye.
Commissioner Levin,
Nay.
Commissioner McKinley,
No.
Commissioner Pollock,
No,
Commissioner Schweikart,
Nay.
Commissioner Slater,
Aye.
and Commissioner Heller is absent. So
The
that
motion
would,
failed. So do we have another motion? Commissioner Pollock.
I moved that we approve the zoning for the entire 9 pieces of property to public service at PS. On staff's second report, that we approve it with all the setbacks that are required under the condition of PS. In their memo, page 3, it says condition 1. So, okay. So I move that we consolidate all the land for a PS zone with the conditions under condition 1B, with the possible exception of a relook at the northern property line.
Okay, so let me track with you to make sure. So you want staff's alternative
1B.
1B. So it's staff's
Alternative.
alternative 1. They had a couple.
If I just may say for clarity, 1 was dealing with the partial rezoning, and then 2 is for the entire rezoning. So if you want to look at alternative 2, that was the one that anticipated the entire, rezoning to PS.
Oh, okay.
So yeah,
I got
focus
it.
on
I
that
got
one
it.
if you're gonna.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's page 4.
Right.
Okay. Let's see. Wait. So alternative 2 would allow existing to become lawful use. It doesn't quite say the whole thing PS, but that's what you're saying under alternative 2?
Yeah, because that was their request, was to be PS for the whole
Right.
thing. So
Okay,
they're
so P-
approving that request under alternative 2, if I'm reading it correctly.
Okay, and then with condition 2A to consolidate all the property into one lot, and then condition 2B, all the setbacks, landscaping, and screening that the PS zone requires, with possible maybe adjustment for the north property line fence.
What about 2C?
Yes, definitely, where the traffic import, yes, and 2C.
Okay, so we have a motion, we need a second.
I second.
And who was that?
Slater.
Thank you. Half of you are hidden under my participant thing, so I can't see unless you raise your hand. So that motion from Commissioner Pollock is to move alternative 2 from staff's report on page 4 with conditions 2A, B, and C. We have a second from Slater. Discussion. Commissioner
Could
Levin.
I,
Commissioner Levin.
sorry, hitting my buttons too fast and I remuted myself. Could I make a friendly amendment to the motion to include the language that the applicant is required to change the zone back to a private use that is congruent with current zones in that area at that time?
Can we discuss this before I say yes or no to him?
I think
Okay.
we can.
Yeah, because see, we had the same issue over on the hospital, down on, where after the hospital sold the property, the people that bought it with the support of the state came forward and asked for rezoning. I don't see why we should change that procedure. And I agree, at least I agree with the staff's research on that. I don't think we have, I don't know if our powers really go that far to sort of, that would be actually, I think in real estate, you're not really allowing somebody to sell the property because they still have conditions on it. So it's not really, I think somebody could be able to go to court and get that overturned. I just think it's wise to do it the way we do. And we did it with the state property down over near the hospital, that whoever buys it in conjunction with the support of the state come and ask for a zone change. So, because they could always condition their land, contract on the condition that it gets rezoned, right?
So Commissioner Levin, that's a no.
But I will take that as a no. In
Yeah,
my friendly amendment.
I'm sorry. You have some really great suggestions there. And I know that suggestion was either yours or Swighardt's from the last time, but I didn't agree with that. I'm sorry, but I'm not gonna accept that friendly motion.
Okay. More discussion on the motion before us. Any comments before
Alienation, that's what it is. Alienation. If you're doing it, you're not allowing alienation. Sorry.
Okay, it's okay. Seeing no hands raised, I'll call for the vote. Shelby?
I'm sorry, can I ask Commissioner Pollock, your motion was a little vague on what the change you wanted to the north boundary to the condition.
Yeah.
So it's either the condition is written or you need to provide what the new condition would be, or that your motion is to exclude that proposed condition.
For the north property line?
Yes.
Isn't that what your motion was, to consider
Right.
something different?
Yeah, to consider something different. But the thing is, it's hard for me to say that when we don't have enough evidence as to where the property line is, where the fence is. So if I were to leave it as is with your condition 1, the way it is, and they can't really make it apply? Is there some way that they come back and ask for an adjustment?
There is a land use application they could go through to change a condition on the zone change. And I think it's a variance. So we go to the hearings officer to amend that condition. I don't know if there's anything that would prohibit them. It might be more expensive or more costly.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's anything that would prohibit them from placing it there.
Okay.
Sorry, can I, sorry,
Go ahead.
can I
Commissioner
address
Spikeart.
a point of clarification? So Lisa, just to clarify what you just said, if Commissioner Pollock was asking that if condition 2B on alternative 2 was left as is, I think she was asking then, does the applicant have a mechanism by which they could request a variance to remove part 1 of condition 2B? And the answer is that they can request a variance to remove part of, not the entire, but part of a condition.
Through the hearings officer.
Through the hearings officer. Is that what I heard?
Yes, and it's, that there's something unique in the property that they didn't know about at the time. It's kind of a high burden to remove a condition on a zone change.
Okay. Okay. Let me clarify this on conditions 2B, section 1, north property line. I'd like to delete the first sentence and just leave the second half for the portion of the north property line located to the west of the existing entrance gate into the storage area. A minimum 6-foot side obscuring hedge shall also be provided. So the thing that I'm going to eliminate is a minimum 5-foot wide landscape setback planted along, according to the type A landscaping standards, along the northern property line.
Okay. So did you get that, Lisa?
Yeah, so you're saying a hedge would be planted, but there's no landscape area required for the hedge?
Isn't the hedge the landscaping?
Right, but there's no minimum dimension, so you'll be removing the minimum dimension of where we're saying they would place the hedge.
Oh my gosh.
Because what I heard the applicant say is they think the pavement goes up to the property line.
Right.
What we're saying is they would need to remove some pavement and put in 5 feet, and normal landscaping wouldn't necessarily require a 6-foot hedge for part of that. It would just require a certain amount of plant units, shrubs. And then the area that's storage would require a taller hedge so you can't see the stored, as a...
Okay, I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to just leave the conditions as is, and the conditions as is, the northern property line as it's written. I'm not gonna do anything with the north property line. So
Okay.
we'll leave it as the recommended conditions in 2B without any changes whatsoever.
Okay. So we're clear on the motion. Adopt alternative 2 with conditions 2A, B, and C. Any more discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Shelby, please.
Commissioner Augustine,
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs,
Aye.
Commissioner Kopcho,
No for me.
Commissioner Levin,
Aye.
Commissioner McKinley,
Aye.
Commissioner Pollock,
Aye.
Commissioner Schweikart,
Aye.
Commissioner Slater.
Aye.
Okay, motion passed. Wow, that was a exercise. So we'll move on to the agenda. Does anybody know what the score of the Blazer game is? Just kidding. Okay, special orders of business, we have none. We have no information reports. And planning administrators report. Lisa.
I will keep it brief. It is the time of year that we need to do our annual report to the city council. And so I'm working on a draft of that. And normally I write up a draft, I send it to all of you for comments. You never comment. I don't know why. And then I haven't yet, but I do every year and I never get any comments.
Oh,
But generally the report is required to cover what you've done in the last year. So we give a summary of, you know, the kinds of cases that you've had, any legislative amendments, any committees you've been on. This year, we're going to try to include some pictures of some developments that you've approved and new developments that have been approved under the new zoning code that was adopted last year to try to make it look nicer, prettier for consumption. And then normally President Griggs will attend council and speak at the beginning during the public comment on the night that it's on the agenda. So if you still want to do that, it's a Zoom meeting, so you won't have to leave your couch, of course.
Okay.
And we're probably going to go on September 14th if that works for you, or September 28th would be our other date. So I'll coordinate more with you on those, Commissioner Griggs.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Okay, good. So hopefully I'll have a draft report out in the next week or so for you guys to look at and comment. And also it's an opportunity, if there's anything as a commission that you want to convey to the council, we can write up something in there. If there's a special message from the commission or from the president or whatever, you know, I just write it up as a staff report, but anything that you want to provide, it's your opportunity if the commission wants to take that. So you can be thinking about that. That's all I have.
What about, do you want to mention briefly our meeting format's going to be different next time?
Yeah, Shelby, you want to tell them what's going on with the next one?
Sure. So starting on September 1st, we will be accepting public testimony. So people have to sign up through Zach and I in order to speak at the hearing. The cutoff will be 3 p.m. the day of the meeting so that we can provide a list to Commissioner Griggs of who will be speaking on what cases. And if anyone joins without signing up previously, we will still let them provide testimony. We will just let Commissioner Griggs know at the beginning of the hearing if anyone additional joined. So I don't think there will be too many changes. We will probably most likely be going back to the original script from in-person meetings with a few minor tweaks. So I'll send that your way. But probably just something more that you guys are used to than these changes that have been happening. Just it'll still be digital, just more like the in-person meetings. So
thank you.
Yeah, and so they'll be in the meeting and they'll be on the screen, you know, so and we'll give them special instructions about when to turn on their camera, when to turn off their camera. And the HLC is the first group to do that Thursday. So hopefully we'll work out all the kinks with the poor HLC before we bring it to the Planning Commission. So, and we do have a hearing scheduled for September 1st, one hearing, I think.
Okay. Any comments for the good of the order?
I do.
Commissioner McKinley.
For the record, I hate the 20s so far. Just want to throw that out there.
Any other comments for the good of the order?
Well,
46 to 41.
Really? Blazers? Okay, well, if there are no other comments,
One real fast for Brian.
Okay.
In the last go round of the 20s, there was prohibition. So, I mean, if you want.
I don't drink.
Yeah, me either. So, okay, let's just hey, let's do it then.
The 20s suck.
Good.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I do.
Commissioner Pollock.
Well, I just want to make sure we're still on to the 23rd for the joint session with the.
Yes, and I think Shelby sent out appointments to everybody, so you should have received an appointment, and then the Zoom link will come later as we get closer.
Okay.
I sent an Outlook appointment, but then I wasn't sure how that read for other emails. So I sent a separate email just in case. So there was 2 that went out.
Oh, okay.
I just have it on my calendar. I don't know that, well, I'll worry about that offline. Okay. You guys have a great night. And I think
Commissioner Slater was trying to talk.
Oh, I did not see that. Oh, Commissioner Slater, you sure are.
I try and follow the rules here.
Yes, you do.
Lisa, can you give us some idea of what's going on with the climate action plan now that it's been funded, I understand, and how that might intersect with the Salem Comprehensive Plan update?
Sure, a little bit. It's being staffed by Public Works staff, so CD's not the lead on it. I understand that they did an RFP, request for proposals. They've hired a consultant to work on the project, just like in the last week or so. And they're putting together an advisory committee. Eunice is on the committee and is working really closely with the staff on that plan, because obviously we saw from our GHG inventory that transportation is our highest, source of emissions. So land use is very important. So we're keeping that in mind with the Salem project. There's been some concerns about the comp plan going before the climate action plan is done. But the draft comp plan goals will have goals related to climate action. And then the idea is the climate action plan will then set what those goals are more specifically for the city. And then, yearly, hopefully the city can monitor that and move forward. So we are working pretty closely together. And I'm happy to ask Patricia Farrell, who's staffing it, to come and give an overview of what's happening. And I believe she's going to ask a planning commissioner to be on the committee. I recommended that. So I'll follow up on that if one of you is interested in being on that stakeholder advisory committee.
Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Capcho.
Yes, my hand went up, not because I'm necessarily interested, because I have 1,000 things that I do already, but to follow up on that question, Lisa, I've said it a few times already on the likelihood of eventually having the Planning Commission serve in some sort of similar fashion to how Portland and maybe Eugene's is modeled, where it's the planning and sustainability, where they oversee kind of, or at least the citizen advisory capacity to what the city staff do for those functions, due to the overwhelming overlap between climate planning and land use and transportation and building, emissions. Is there, if I were to suggest such a thing to be looked into, what would the process look like? Should I just email that question?
I was like, I mean, I think the council it's up to the council to reassign duties or expand the duties or contract the duties of any commission, unless Natasha tells me I'm wrong. So I believe the council wanted to do that and assign certain additional duties or change the name of the planning commission, for example, to put sustainability in it and then identify other things you'd be responsible for. They can do that. It wasn't that long ago that the planning commission did historic, or there was like a different design commission. The planning commission didn't do design. We had a commission that did design and historic. And then that was like really weird because design of a new building and then historic design didn't really go together, right? So then they gave design to the planning commission. So they can change the scope over time, but it's up to the council. I don't see Natasha unmuting to say I got it wrong. So I think that's the answer.
I think you got it right. And it would be a code change by council to probably clearly expand the duties, but yes, they could do it.
There's a lobbying opportunity for you, Commissioner Capcho. Any other comments for the good of the order? I will adjourn the meeting. Done.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.